Elijah Brown stood in Courtroom 6B, sweat beading on his forehead like bullets fired from a gun. $25,000, he whispered incredulously to himself as Judge Raymond Lasker levied the fine, a smirk etched on his face. The words echoed in his mind, ricocheting off the walls of the chamber that had become a cage meant to silence him. "You're out of line, Mr. Brown." The judge's voice boomed, a war cry signaling his authority. Elijah, however, felt a fire igniting within him. He had spent years standing against the very forces that conspired to displace families like Jocelyn Grant's, families who looked up to him, who relied on him to speak truthfully about a system riddled with corruption. "Judge Lasker, your actions cannot go unchecked. I'm not here to be quiet and compliant." His words slid through the air like sharp knives, slicing through the tension in the room. The audience, mostly empty, but pregnant with anticipation, shifted uneasily in their seats. A few whispered among themselves, cameras hidden beneath their coats, itching to document this confrontation. Elijah caught the eye of a reporter sitting in the back, her pen poised over her notepad, the same way he himself had been poised for a challenge. "You are just a teacher," Lasker said, dismissing him with a wave of his hand. "You don't belong here." Elijah's rage simmered below the surface, but the steadiness in his voice hardened, as if tempered in the fires of resilience. "Every parent, every tenant, every child matters. They deserve the truth." With that, the judge's gaze darkened, and Elijah felt the stakes climb higher. The courtroom atmosphere shifted, tension thickened like the heavy humidity outside. This was no longer just a legal battle. It was a struggle for the very soul of a community, his community. Elijah had dedicated himself to this fight ever since he'd watched his students vanish one by one under the weight of eviction notices and encroaching gentrification. The oppressive system that systematically expelled families from their homes was the same one he now faced in this courtroom. He had documented each unjust eviction, each misplaced notice, piecing together a tapestry of rights neglected and lives shattered. But Lasker's voice sliced through his thoughts again, startling him back to reality. "Let me remind you, Mr. Brown, this is not a public forum. If you keep this up, you will be held in contempt. Isn't it already contempt that you indulge in this charade, to dismiss the stories of those affected by your decisions?" Elijah shot back, his heart racing. The room held its breath, and for that brief moment, he saw something flicker across the judge's face. Hesitation, perhaps. "Fee! Order!" Lasker barked. "This court will be adjourned if you cannot follow protocol." Elijah stood firm, refusing to cower under the intimidation that hung in the air like a noose. "You may have power, Judge, but you don't have the truth on your side." And with that declaration, discussions outside the courtroom buzzed, and the press took note. Elijah knew he had crossed the line, but appeals and procedural demands felt like whispers in a storm. He had awakened something within himself, a rage that wasn't rooted in anger but in profound love for his community. Suddenly, the world outside halted as Elijah prepared to expose what lay beyond the pomp and circumstance of the judge's robe, a network of collusion and deceit. He pulled the heavy files he had painstakingly compiled from his briefcase, the quiet nightmares of Glenfield housing, and set them down on the table. "I want these records unsealed," he declared, holding a seemingly ordinary flash drive, now charged with the potential to change lives. The gavel hit the bench with a deafening crack. "Take him away." The judge spat, but Elijah felt something crack in the room, a shift that would not go unnoticed, a clamor for truth beginning to take root. As the bailiff moved towards him, the air hummed with anticipation. Reporters eyed him eagerly, sensing history being made. "I'm not afraid," Elijah said, despite the rising tumult around him. "Yes, but are you ready for what's coming next?" A shiver raced down his spine as he thought of the machinery he was about to confront. The ramifications stretching far beyond this courtroom seemed infinite. Yet he could not turn back. The next steps were critical, and Elijah felt every heart pounding in the room. He thought of Jocelyn, of the families he had met, of the future that hung precariously in the balance. Looking away isn't an option anymore. I refuse to be silenced. Pulling himself upright, knowing he had stepped into a conflict he could never back away from. He faced the judge, and I'm prepared to take this all the way. As the tension in the room thickened, Elijah Brown had set the stage for a fight far larger than himself, a fight that could redefine justice in Birmingham. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a monumental battle that would reveal deep-rooted corruption and shake the very foundations of power. As the tension in the room thickened, Elijah Brown had set the stage for a fight far larger than himself, a fight that could redefine justice in Birmingham. The weight of his determination hung in the air like a banner of defiance, and he could feel the trembling chords of hope vibrating from the few tenants and supporters present. "Escort him out," Judge Lasker ordered, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. But as the bailiff stepped closer, Elijah's thoughts surged ahead. He had refused to be silenced, and that alone seemed to broaden the horizons of his fight. With that flash drive still cooling in his palm, he knew he held something vital, evidence, hope, and perhaps a way to reclaim dignity for a community yearning for justice. "Your Honor," Elijah called out, his voice rising above the murmurs, "I'm not just standing up for myself. I'm here for every family who was evicted without notice, without reason. You may dismiss me now, but these truths will rise above." "Enough!" Lasker's face flushed, and his hands clenched. Yet even amidst the confrontation, the judge's pallor felt like a flicker of vulnerability. For the first time, Elijah sensed that his brave step toward transparency had shaken the foundations of Lasker's self-assured dominion. "Take him away," Lasker repeated. But echoes of Elijah's resolve lingered as the bailiff reached for him. Elijah felt the audience leaning forward in their seats, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. As he was led out of the courtroom, he caught sight of Regina Alvarez, his civil rights attorney, staring at him with an expression that spoke volumes. It was a mix of concern and pride. She had been right to guide him through the murky waters of this fight, and he sensed her silent encouragement whispering to him, "Stay strong." Outside, the reporters flurried around the courthouse, voices rising in anticipation. They knew something significant had just occurred, a moment that sparkled with potential. Someone in the crowd, a journalist with a ponytail and a notepad, called out to him, "Mr. Brown, what's next?" Elijah paused, shaking off the tension from the courtroom. "Next," he echoed, allowing a wry smile to creep onto his face. "We take this to the people, to every single family affected, every name on those eviction notices. The truth is out there, and the fight is just beginning." With that proclamation, he stepped toward the gathering crowd, feeling energized by their support. It was clear now more than ever, he wasn't alone. This was not just about judges and housing boards. It was about a community standing together, a movement igniting in every heart that had been silenced. Days turned into a whirlwind of activity. Elijah and Regina huddled together in the makeshift office of the Housing Justice Group, Keep Birmingham Home. Buzzing conversations filled the air as they strategized. The files Elijah had compiled spilled across the table, pages covered with glaring statistics, personal testimonies, and the unvarnished truth of the corruption lurking in the shadows. "We need to file a formal complaint against Judge Lasker," Regina said, her gaze steady as she examined the evidence. "And we have to do it fast. The attention is on him now, and we can't afford to lose momentum." "Yes," Elijah nodded, invigorated by the urgency. "But we also have to amplify the voices of those affected. Share their stories. Make them impossible to ignore." As word spread about the court's explosive showdown, donations poured in to help support the families Elijah wanted to uplift. They organized community meetings in schools and churches, igniting an undercurrent of activism that was both raw and genuine. Each gathering solidified their case, interweaving personal stories and statistics that created a tapestry of injustice. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Jocelyn Grant stepped before a gathered crowd. The mother of three, whose own family had faced eviction just weeks before, spoke with a trembling bravery. "They took our home from us, but they can't take our voice. We deserve to be heard, and we will demand change. The crowd erupted into applause, rallying around her fiery proclamation. It was in these moments, amidst the laughter and solemnity, that Elijah saw the shift. People began to understand their communal power, and it lit a flame of resolve throughout the gathering. But the darkness of the system loomed ever-present. Just as hope began to swell, Elijah started receiving strange phone calls, block numbers, and menacing voices uttering veiled threats. One night after a particularly successful community meeting, he found slashed tires waiting for him in the parking lot. He filed a report, knowing full well that the intimidation would only intensify. "This is a warning, Elijah," Regina said, concern etching lines on her forehead. "You're shaking the wrong trees, and there will be repercussions. I've faced those repercussions all my life. If I'm afraid now, then what was all this for?" His determination surged, eclipsing the fear overshadowing him. "I can't let them win." Weeks passed, and as the inquiries into Judge Laska's past began to mount, Elijah found himself the center of scrutiny and admiration. Yet, he believed the real victory lay in more than just exposing a corrupt judge. It lay in bending the arc toward justice. On one particularly eventful day, as Elijah returned from a gathering with tenants, his phone buzzed with a message that made his heart thud in his chest. It was Regina, her text loaded with urgency. Asterisk, the Oversight Committee is moving on Laska. They want to review the records you've compiled. Asterisk. Elijah's pulse quickened. This was the opportunity he needed, and in a matter of hours, he was drafting a comprehensive overview of his findings that would be sent to the committee. He knew they would require every ounce of evidence for their case, every unacceptable eviction, every collusive email, every injustice that had bubbled beneath the surface. Sitting at his desk, surrounded by scattered papers and remnants of hope, Elijah dove deep into memories of the families he fought for and the faces of the children who once brightened his classroom. With unwavering focus, he pored over the records and filed the documents, breathing life into stagnant truths that had long been buried. But just as he sealed it off in an envelope, a sinking feeling pierced his gut. He had expected pushback, and he knew he would get it. The ramifications of his actions would ripple far beyond his neighborhood, challenging the very framework of power reigning over Birmingham. With the envelope tucked securely under his arm, he made his way to the Oversight Committee's office. As he walked down the sterile halls, the enormity of what he was doing settled on his shoulders like an old coat, heavy and reassuring. Elijah was no longer just a teacher in a classroom filled with outdated textbooks. He was a beacon of truth in a system that thrived on silence. Reaching the committee's door, Elijah took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of change in the air. He was prepared for whatever came next. He knocked, and as the door swung open, he stepped into the heart of a fight that had only begun. The stakes were high, but for Elijah Brown, truth was worth every risk. Reaching the committee's door, Elijah took a deep breath, ready to step into the heart of a fight that had only begun. He walked into the sterile office, where the hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A small table sat in the middle, surrounded by somber faces that mirrored the gravity of the moment. "Mr. Brown, thank you for coming," one of the committee members said, gesturing toward a seat. "We've heard a lot about your findings regarding Judge Laska and the Glenfield Housing Board." Elijah nodded, his heart pounding in his chest as he took his seat. "I appreciate you taking this seriously. The evidence is overwhelming, and it's time to hold accountable those who have abused their power." The committee members exchanged glances, leaning in as he laid out the details from his documents. With every statistic he recited and every name he mentioned, he could feel their interest deepening. He detailed the patterns, families evicted, records sealed, and the connections that tied them to Laska. One woman, a seasoned member with kind eyes framed by silver strands, leaned forward. "Why did you wait until now to present this?" "Because I had to gather enough evidence to expose the truth. It was never just about me, but about the families affected." He paused, hands clenched tightly in his lap. People deserve to know what really happens behind those court doors. Their response was slow but deliberate. They asked questions, challenged his findings, but deep down, Elijah felt he had ignited a spark within them. They were not just listening. They were beginning to absorb what he presented. But the atmosphere shifted abruptly when someone knocked on the door. A figure stepped in, a man with a tailored suit and an air of confidence that commanded attention. Elijah recognized him immediately. It was Tom Wexley, a member of the housing board who had been named in Elijah's complaints. "What's he doing here?" one of the committee members said, their voice low, anxious. "Ah, so this is the whistleblower," Wexley said, his tone dripping with sarcasm as he crossed his arms. "I overheard that you were having a little meeting. Thought I'd stop by to offer some clarification." Elijah felt the weight of Wexley's gaze like a spotlight aimed at him. "You're not welcome here," he stated sharply. "This is about accountability, not intimidation." Wexley chuckled, seemingly unfazed. "Accountability? You think you're going to be the one to bring us down? This is all a game, and you're just a pawn." Elijah stood, refusing to let fear dictate his stance. "If I'm a pawn, then I'll show everyone this game can be played differently. You might have the system on your side now, but once the truth is out, it'll be you who's exposed." The committee members exchanged anxious glances, sensing the tension escalating. "Let's focus on the evidence," Mr. Wexley, another committee member, interjected. "This is not your forum." Wexley raised an eyebrow. "You think it's that easy? You're stepping into a game of chess with players you don't even understand. You're picking a fight with powerful people, and it's not going to end well for you. Is that a threat?" Elijah glared, feeling the heat of the moment pulse around him. "Just a friendly warning," Wexley smirked. "The people you're messing with don't play fair." "I'm not afraid of you or your so-called power," Elijah shot back, his muscles tightening. "Every day you maintain this facade, lives are being destroyed. Families like Jocelyn's are losing everything." Wexley laughed, but it lacked conviction. "You better watch your back, Brown, and you better hope those who have your back can keep you safe." As Wexley turned to leave, Elijah felt a rush of adrenaline. This was not just about the fight ahead, but a battle to reclaim justice for those forced to live in fear. "Get out," one of the committee members demanded, spitting the command like poison. As Wexley exited, the door swinging shut behind him, Elijah took a moment to gather himself, his breath steadying after the confrontation. He looked around at the committee members. They were unsettled, but he could see something had changed in them. "Are you still with me?" he asked, voice steady. "Yes," the silver-haired woman replied, a hint of determination visible in her eyes. "And if you're willing to take this risk, then so are we." The meeting continued with renewed energy. Elijah shared every shred of evidence he held. As he spoke, passion brimmed in his voice, painting the picture of a community that had demanded attention for too long. Hours passed, and when the meeting finally adjourned, Elijah emerged into the bright afternoon light, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He had taken a step toward justice, but it was merely a beginning. The ripple had started, but the waves had yet to crash. In the days that followed, the Oversight Committee began their investigation. Elijah watched from the sidelines as reports circulated, court documents were scrutinized, and whispers of corruption clawed their way into the public sphere. Each headline brought a mix of elation and dread. With every layer peeled back, it seemed more people were ready to speak up. But lurking behind this momentum, Elijah still felt the chill of Wexley's warning. The threats weren't empty. The pushback against his efforts would only grow fiercer. His resolve strengthened as he aligned with local activists, rallying people to share their stories. One evening, as he prepped for another community meeting, his phone buzzed with a text from Regina. *, we need to talk. There's talk of intimidation tactics ramping up. *. He quickly gathered his things and set out, heart racing. He couldn't let anyone's fear derail the movement they had built together. But the reality weighed heavily on him. Just as he stepped into Regina's office, he saw the determination in her eyes. "Elijah," she said, voice low, "the word is that someone may escalate things. They are not content with just threats anymore." His gut tightened. What does that mean? Informants. People close to Laska suggesting they might try to silence you. Or worse. Elijah felt every heartbeat thunder in his ears. The stakes had never felt this high. But as he looked into Regina's eyes, steely and fierce, he knew he wasn't backing down now. "Let's get to work," he said, bearing down on the fight ahead. "We're not just telling our stories, we're changing the game." In the following weeks, they strategized. Their work became more urgent, meetings more frequent, each moment filled with purposeful action. Elijah fueled the passion of the community, starting workshops to teach residents how to document their experiences, record their voices, and claim their narratives amid the chaos. One night, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, he received another anonymous tip from a resident who had overheard a conversation about the housing board. "They are planning something, Elijah," they warned. "Something big. Be careful." The weight of fear loomed over him, but his heart beat with determination. He would face whatever storm was coming. The fight for justice was worth every ounce of courage he possessed. He owed it to Jocelyn, to the community that rallied behind him, and to those who had suffered in silence for too long. He stood resolved. The chaos was rising, but so was the anticipation of change. The dark night felt electric, and somewhere, deep within him, a fire was igniting, a fire that could light up the shadows threatening to engulf Birmingham. He wasn't just a pawn anymore. He was a player in a game long overdue for upheaval. He wasn't just a pawn anymore. He was a player in a game long overdue for upheaval. As Elijah braced himself for the inevitable confrontation with the housing board, plans began to crystallize. Days turned into a blur as he mobilized the community. Local organizers, activists, and residents united under one cause, fighting back against the corruption that had long overshadowed their lives. Their gatherings grew, a chorus of voices lifting together, each story weaving into a powerful narrative that could not be ignored. But with that unity came escalating tension. Rumors circulated in hushed tones about retaliation from the housing board. Anonymous threats loomed in the back of Elijah's mind. But with each new day, he found strength in the faces surrounding him. People like Jocelyn, who had begun organizing her neighbors, sharing their experiences, inspiring others to stand up and be counted. One evening, as they gathered in the dimly lit community center, Elijah stood before a bustling crowd, feverishly preparing them for the public demonstration aimed at pressuring the Oversight Committee further. He raised his voice, charged with enthusiasm and urgency. "We are standing at a pivotal moment. Our stories matter, and together we can force change. This isn't just about housing, it's about our dignity." The crowd erupted into applause, and the momentum surged in the room. Faces glowed with resolve, eyes sparkled with determination. The more they shared, the more the fear shrank back. By the time the meeting concluded, they were a cohesive unit, ready to step into the spotlight and take a stand. As the day of the demonstration approached, the city buzzed with anticipation. News outlets picked up the story, amplifying the message about the persistent issues plaguing renters in Birmingham. Elijah knew they were ready, but he couldn't shake the anxiety building in his gut. On the appointed day, as families gathered under the bright morning sun, holding signs that called for justice, Elijah felt both anxious and invigorated. His message rang out, echoing down the streets. "We will not be moved. We will not be silenced." As the demonstration commenced, signs waving and voices resonating, Elijah scanned the crowd and caught sight of Regina. She was on the phone, visibly tense as she waved him over. "We need to talk," she said, urgency lacing her voice. "What's going on?" he asked, heart racing. "The housing board is planning to make a statement this afternoon. Something big. They are trying to frame the narrative before we can." "What do you mean?" "We have to be prepared. We can't let them spin this in their favor. I've got sources saying they're going to downplay everything we've uncovered." Elijah clenched his fists, the determination surging within him again. "We'll counter it. We'll tell our stories louder." As the hours passed, the tension in the air thickened. Elijah led the crowd in chants and collective actions, but in the back of his mind loomed the daunting prospect of the board's counterattack. Still, the energy was electric. Together, they were carving out a space for change, one voice at a time. Just as the demonstration hit its peak, an unexpected figure emerged from the crowd. a local news reporter who had previously cornered Elijah with ambivalent questions. "Can we talk, Elijah?" she shouted over the chanting crowd. Caught off guard, he nodded, gesturing for her to follow him a short distance away. "What do you need?" "Listen, I've seen the stories coming out, and I know you're fighting the good fight. But I just got word that there's going to be some backlash, legal actions against activists, and they are looking to discredit you personally." A chill ran down Elijah's spine. "Discredit me how?" "Negative articles, perhaps a smear campaign. They'll spin it to paint you as an instigator rather than a leader. You need to be cautious." Anger bubbled within him, but Elijah pushed it aside. "I won't back down. They can try, but we're too strong together. We have the truth on our side." She nodded, a slightly hesitant acceptance before she wandered back to her crew. But Elijah felt the weight of her words settle beneath his skin, a reminder of the cost of fighting against established power. As the demonstration culminated, Elijah turned to the crowd one last time. "The fight isn't just today. This is a long game. We've lit the fire. Now we have to keep it burning. The truth cannot be silenced." Cheers erupted around him, a powerful reminder that he was not alone, and together they could push through any storm. On the following days, they gathered in smaller groups, worked on refining their messaging, and prepared for direct legal actions. Community members began sharing their stories more publicly, and the committee could not ignore the groundswell of support building around them. But late that evening, just as Elijah returned home, he received a text from Regina that sent chills through him. Asterisk, they're not backing down. I've heard chatter of them trying to make an example of someone. Be careful. Asterisk. Elijah's blood ran cold. He thought about the imminent threats that loomed large, and he realized it was only a matter of time before someone sought to intimidate him into submission. Determined not to let fear take hold, Elijah poured himself into organizing legal workshops, a way to empower the community in their fight against further intimidation or eviction. People needed to know their rights and understand how to protect themselves in the tumultuous landscape of housing insecurity. As they prepared for their next community meeting, a sense of hope began to bloom anew amidst the rhetoric of fear. They were not merely fighting against a system. They were igniting a movement rooted in resilience. On a sunlit Saturday afternoon, residents filled the community center, eager to learn how to document their stories and fight against exploitation. Elijah stood at the front, speaking with genuine passion. "Your voice is your power. Together, we are the tide that will wash away the injustice in this system. No more silence." And just as Elijah basked in the palpable energy in the room, someone burst through the doors, a friend and fierce ally, out of breath and wide-eyed. "You need to see this." As the murmurs rose, Elijah caught his breath, feeling a rush of adrenaline. The message on the screen behind him, loud, clear, and undeniable, depicted a social media post from Wexley announcing the board's decision to evict families en masse, seemingly backed by the mayor's silence. "This is the storm they're unleashing," Elijah muttered, heart pounding in his chest. But amidst the fear, something else ignited within them, a surge of unity and determination. "Let's fight back. We'll rally again and make our stand even louder. This is just fuel to our fire." He meant every word, as the resonance of their shared anger filled the room, pushing them forward into uncharted territory. No longer merely reacting to the battles of the board, they were now strategizing and moving to reclaim power. With unwavering resolve, Elijah led them into the next phase of their journey, the fire within them driving them into the heart of the storm. They were ready to rise up, unite, and fiercely claim their right to stability, safety, and dignity. The battle escalated, but in the struggle, they discovered their strength. Whatever tactics the board might employ, they were prepared to forge through, revealing the true heart of their fight for justice. Together, undeterred, unstoppable, and unwilling to back down.